All right, good morning, guys. So, next week is spring break. We're going to try to get you guys done, and hopefully, at least in this class and a couple of others of mine, you won't have anything to do over spring break. That's at least my intention. Give you guys kind of a break, see what's going to happen in the world exciting. So, we've looked at 4-4.1. Hopefully it gave you some ideas to work towards 4.2. They really are reciprocals of each other. One encrypts, one decrypts, so that should be some ideas about how we can do that. There's some other ideas in here, so tracking down logical errors, that when you look at these, slowly, I took out of another book just to kind of give you some ideas about what might go wrong. So, for example, in this piece of programming, there's some errors. So we track down logical errors. So here we said the total is car plus rent plus jet plus gifts plus food plus staff plus guru. But I had never converted those to, because I took those in as an input, and I never converted those to any kind of number. So what it's going to do is put all those things together, but not in the way that we were hoping for or thinking for. So this book is actually a really quick read and has some fun games you can actually do. So I've thrown it in there as another way to get you some additional information. So there's a couple of different pieces in here. I will leave those to you guys to try and manipulate. So what I want to do is talk about our program we have here that you have to submit. So we're going to force you to submit another program using Python natively. So the first thing always we're going to have to do is a couple of things. One, we have to probably use that idle environment, although I did show you how to use Notepad++ or introduce you to it. So I'm going to start a new one here, and I'm just going to use this. But this is probably the hardest piece of this, is when I decide to save this, I need to make sure I save it in a location that I can find easily. So, before I do anything else, I'm just going to put my name at the top and maybe a description of it. So, clock using loops. So, I'm going to save this so I know where it's at. And so I'm going to do a save as, downloads, or documents. And I have one here I'm going to call Python file. And I know that I've got a couple of other things in here, so I'm going to call this one clock 2, because I actually have a clock 1 in there. So I don't have to change this type. It's already going to say it's a Python file for me. And so now I've saved this file called clock2.py. I need to have my name and a description of it, so when I pull those in bulk, I know whose program it is. And I need to think a little bit about this. So we're going to create a clock built using loops that are nested. So in other words, if you've ever had the old-fashioned kind of clock on your desk where you can almost watch it as the zeros wind around on the minutes, the seconds flip over, that's kind of what we're looking for here. And we need to build this kind of from the inside out. And so our inside piece is going to be the seconds. So the seconds of our clock so we need to create a loop that will count from essentially 0 to 59. We never see 60 seconds on a clock because when we hit 60, it flips over and becomes the next number in our sequence. So there are a lot of ways we could do this. We could do it as a while loop, while seconds are less than 60. And so we could do it this way. While seconds are less than 60, we would print seconds. And then we have to increase that value somehow. So seconds equals seconds plus 1. And that will force that second value to go up. What I don't have in here, though, at the beginning of the loop, I need to say seconds equal to 0. Because I'm going to put this whole piece inside of another loop. And if I don't have that seconds equals 0, it's going to run once and then stop. So we could try this and see what happens here. So I've already saved it, so if I hit run, it's going to do nothing. So I have to figure out what I have done wrong with this particular thing. So did I create an issue with my while loop? So I'm like, well, let me see what's going on. So I'm going to put a piece outside of here, and I'm going to do a print seconds. So, and I may even put in there something else. So again, I can use this as a troubleshooting tool to try to figure out what is going on or what happened with my loop. So when I do that, it says, okay, seconds never increased, but I did make it through that loop. So I need to probably look at my code a little closer here. And did I do something really dumb, like spell a name wrong? Or did I do this? Do I want seconds greater than 60 or seconds less than 60? So what's going to happen when my 0 is 0 greater than 60? No, so it's going to skip right out of that loop. So that simple thing of putting in a symbol backwards. So now we can run it and see if that cleared up our issue. And it did. Look at that. It ran all the way through there. Now notice, it did print a value for 60. Interesting. So because it goes through here and it says seconds plus 1, so even though this loop, we printed 59, it added one more, and then it got up here to the top of this loop and dropped out. So just something to keep in mind, that value may not be what we think it is all the time. So if I could do seconds this way, let me get rid of this. Let me see if I can do minutes very similarly. So I'm going to create one called minutes, and I can do it as a while loop. While minutes are less than 60, because there's similar type of structure. And now I could do a print minutes, and minutes equals minutes plus 1. So I've got two loops here. Let's see what happens. So minutes is not defined. Somehow I did something silly. Well, minutes is less than 60. So equals 0. So the very first time it tried to check that, we didn't know what minutes were. There was no value for it. So we have to put this at the top of the loop to start that or initialize that variable. Okay, so if you notice, what it did was it ran through the minutes and ran through the seconds. Well, that's not quite what I want. So what I'd like to do is display both of them together. So I'm going to take this print out of here. Just make it go away for now. And I want to put this loop inside of this loop. So I'm going to do something a little tricky here. I'm going to highlight this, and I'm going to go up here to my format, and where it says indent, I'm going to move that whole block in. So now, all of this is going to run inside of this loop. Does that make sense? So I've got some extra spaces in here. And then down here where I print seconds, what I really want to print is minutes. Maybe a colon between them. So, now, let's see if this happens to work. So, this whole thing should run outside, and it should run on the inside. So, let's see what happens if I run. Okay. Invalid syntax somewhere. What did I do here? Oh, I didn't put a comma in. Try it again. Alright, so now, notice as it goes, the minutes are adding up every time it hits 60 in there. So we're creating a clock. Now, in fact, it's kind of nice for this because it's running fast. We can show what's happening, but we'll come back to that here in a minute. Get the pun. And so it stops at 60 minutes and 59 seconds. And that leads me to a little bit of a problem. Because do I want to have, if I go to a next hour or day, do I want to have 60 minutes or do I want to have something a little less? So we may have to think about how we're going to flip that a little bit. Alright, so we've got minutes and we've got hours, although we see that we have a tiny issue with it. But we'll figure out a solution to that really quickly. Alright, so the next piece we want is hours. So I'm going to say hours. And I'm going to do a structure very similar. So hours equals 0. And I'm going to start a loop. So I'm going to say while hours are less than 24, then I'm going to have hours equals hours plus 1. Alright, so now, if that same trick worked here, now I can do this again and format and indent that region. So now, this loop runs inside of this loop, and this loop runs inside of both loops. So, just as a test here, so let's put in my print statement, I want to print hours, and I'll put a colon in between them. This time remember to hit the comma. So now I have some loops running, and so I'm going to hit run, and let's see what happens. Now, I can tell you that there's probably going to be an issue or two that we need to address, and some of that's some logical issues. But so far, when we get to 24 or 60, let's see what happens when it flips over to the hours and make sure that works. So depending on the speed of your computer, what really slows this program down is outputting to the screen, or it would do this in literally a flash. Alright, so it did flip over the numbers, but we need to figure out what we can do about this issue. So the seconds work correctly. It goes to 59, and then it flips to 0. But the minutes don't work correctly. And so you can see that if I can scroll up far enough here. I tried to catch it quick enough and I didn't. So notice the minutes go all the way to 60. Yeah. Alright, well, that's kind of a problem. But they look similar. So, we need to come up with a solution for that. And there's a lot of different solutions. So, we could come up with a slightly different loop structure. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take all of this off the table real quickly. I'm going to make our lives easier. So, I'm going to do it this way. I know how many loops I need to create, so I'm actually going to use a for loop. So I'm going to do my minute, or my second loops here, for second loop with a for loop. Now, again, you can do it any which way you want to, but I think this is a little easier. So for seconds in range. Now, oh, it's coming. All right. So we could do it this way, 0, 59. And that says intrinsically we're not going to go past those numbers. If I did this, I could shorten it up a little bit because I know that 60 is really 0 through 59. So it doesn't make much difference in there. And the really nice thing with this for loop is it shortens it up. It puts the test and the conditioning all outside of there for me. And so now I could put this print statement in right here. Move it up there. I don't need this because it automatically increments it for me, right? So now, if I came up above there and I did a minute loop with a for loop, so I could do something very similar for minutes in range 60. And then if I put this here, and I format that to go indented, so now this loop runs inside of this loop. All right. And if I do something a little different, and I say, well, and now I need an hour loop, so for hour in range 24, which would be 0 to 23, now I can take this and I can indent it so that this loop runs inside of this loop, which runs inside of this loop. Now, here's the one kind of tricky part in here. If I just try to run this right now, oh, forgot. Okay. So it's going to give me a couple of things. It's going to say, well, hours aren't defined. Okay. So I still need this piece at the top of this where I say seconds equals 0 to start this. Here's the reason why. This loop will run once, but it ends at the end with seconds being 59. Each time this loop runs, I need to start over with 0. So if I need to do it with this one, I need to do it with this one also. Equals 0. So that way our loop will always start at 0 and run through. Hours. I'm going to say hours. Okay. So I can build a loop like this. And where did I put hours? Oh, hang on. Hour, not hours. All right. So now, let's see if that solves our problem of that 59 issue on the second loop in there. And I think it should, because that shouldn't go past. I do not know what has got my sinuses upset, but something is already blooming. Welcome to spring. Or this week. Alright. It's almost up to the minute, and we'll see if it flips correctly. 55, 56, 57, 58, 59. Look at that. So that's that idea of building a clock. So this runs. There's a couple of things we might want to do to make it even better. So I'm going to task you with making this pretty and a little more useful. And one of the things I want to do is I want to make this run more like a clock. So one of the things that we could do is we could ask for you to input a time to start with on these. That's going to be a little tricky, so I'm not going to make you do that because it's going to reset every hour here. But one of the things we can do is make it a little closer to accurate timing in terms of how do I start here. So as it scrolls through there really, really fast on the other side, I want to try something, and I'm going to import time. There's a lot of other ways to do this. One of the ways we used to do this was we would put a loop inside of, for example, here, and do something silly that we know would approximately take a second to do, so inside of our computer. Well, we don't really want to do that because we don't need to. Now we have this time module. And so one of the things we could do, if I look inside of what time can do, I have something called a sleep. Time.sleep. And when I put in a value, I put it in as seconds. So I'm going to put 1 second in there. And I'm going to go over here and stop this really quickly. Okay, so now I'm going to run it again with that time.sleep in there. Yes, I do want to save it. And notice that's a lot closer to what we wanted to start with. So now we have a little more accurate timekeeping. That's great. So there are a lot of other ways you could have done that to delay that out. So again, we could have put in loops. There's all different kinds of other functions we could have used. This is just one I found to be kind of handy and pretty easy to use. Because literally I put in however many seconds you want to sleep or wait. There are ways to format the time. This is just showing you really the nested loops. It's not actually pulling the time out. If you could format it using a lot of different ways to do that. AM and PM, so if I wanted to think about it that way, AM and PM would really be, we'd change this to 12 hours, and then we'd put a loop up over the top of that to flip back and forth from AM to PM. Does that make sense, Caden? So, I'm just setting it up this way. The point of this is really more I want to show you how these nested loops work, because inside of here, this runs a lot of different times. So if you think about it, this is going to run every second of every day if we let it loop for an entire day and run. All right, so if you're over here and you want to stop this, Control-C will break it at any time, so the keyboard interrupt. So you could try putting in hours. I would encourage you to try to make it a little neater. And here's the challenge I will leave kind of as a top of the line challenge here. One of the things that would be really neat is if you could make the screen blank and then just have the time appear, so the time only is what's showing on the screen. This is great, but it would be kind of neat if you could do that where you had the time only showing up on the screen. So if you had a way to clear the screen that actually works. So there's a lot of, when you go searching for clear screens, that's one of the weird things that's kind of hard to do inside of this environment we're working in. So in this case, I like for loops. I like to make sure I document what I'm doing. So this minutes equals 0 resets at every time back to where we began. So in here, that range works really, really well. If I need something different, so maybe we've got a weird time system that goes from 5 to 60. Maybe we want to show it in 5-minute intervals. We could do that inside that range and do it this way. There's another sneeze buried inside of there and it's wanting to come out. So this would actually show us, see if I can get it to work. So it would start at 5 and it would work its way through in 5-minute intervals, which may be useful for depending on what you're looking at, but that for loops are really, really, really powerful. So I just like to throw those out as a way to do that. You could do this whole thing with while loops. You could do it in a variety of different manners. But I personally like this idea of the nested loops. So as a preview of something that's going to be on your final, you're going to have a problem similar to this, except it may be as a countdown timer. So here we're going from 5 to 60. What if I did this where we went 60, 1 or 59, 0? So think about that in terms of as a countdown. Are there ways we could count down from a specific time? So 59, 1, 0. So there will be a problem you have to work on at the final, and you're going to have to figure out how to count down very similarly. So you might experiment just a little bit with how those are going to work. But this will get you sort of there. So again, what I'd like to see is a clear screen if you can accomplish it. Formatting. And making sure your code executes. So if you type all this in and it doesn't work, it doesn't do much good. So in this particular case, you can make this a pretty quick program. You can find other methods versus the time method I'm showing you here. That's just one I've used quite a bit because I like that ability just to pause the program for a specified time. And it does a really nice job on that. So if I wanted to do something like pause it for 10 seconds. So if I write a program in Python and I'm attacking somebody's web server and I'm trying to get credentials in there, I've done a little investigation and I know that after like 10 attempts, it makes me take a 5-minute wait. Well, I could put in 5 times 60 or 300 seconds after a certain period of time, and it would actually do that. And then I could do that again. So, not that I've ever done that, because that would be wrong, Chris. This is looking at me. All right. So that is your assignment. So when you save this, then you will just come over here and you will actually click on this assignment. Browse local files, make sure that it's a Python file, so it says .py, and then submit it this way. And that way I will have that file in my hand. So it won't let me do it because I'm apparently an instructor in this course. So that's our assignment for this week. There is no discussion board. I would ask that you look at some of these other ones just kind of out of curiosity. We'll finish up this chapter on when we get back after break. So we'll work a little bit more on chapter 4. And we're halfway there already, guys. We're halfway there. Hopefully everybody has, Brian's over there like, yes. Hopefully everybody has a really great break. I will say that even though as nice a temperatures as it is here, I have some friends of mine that are in Puerto Rico on the beach right now, and they're sending me pictures. And I got some right before I came into class, and they're on this beautiful beach. It made me a little sad. But that's okay. All right. Any questions?